stream has to catch up.
There we go.
And yeah, okay, excellent. So, you know, we should probably start by talking about the book,
Yes.
right?
Well, first, what? Welcome everybody. Also, I didn't get to say welcome. Um, why don't we start even? I would start even a little further back, like talking about us. Why are we here?
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
What do you want to say? Why are you here, Alex?
Well, I am here because we usually hang out on Fridays at the physical studio in the Butler Library on 115th and Broadway. But because of COVID, we can't hang out there anymore. We have very limited use of space right now by reservation in Butler Library and all of our other libraries on campus. So right now, this is the best we could come up with to keep on doing a little bit of that work that we were doing there on the studio on during open lab hours on Fridays from 3 to 5. Usually what we did there was hang out in different teams and work on different projects. So in this iteration, which I
Can
think
you hold on?
is substantially
I'm
different.
cutting you off. Can you talk a little bit more about the projects? Like what sort of stuff would be done in studio? Because project is a really abstract, you know.
Right, right. We usually would work on digital humanities projects or uh, digital scholarship projects. Sometimes they would be uh, projects outside of the traditional purview of the humanities. But in any case, the gravitational pull was the kind of activities that we associate with with the digital humanities,
Hmm.
text analysis, digital exhibits, maps, etc. So we usually did this working physically present with each other on Fridays, graduate students, librarians, and faculty at Butler Library. For 8 years, we've been doing that.
Hmm.
Um, and this, which I was going to say, this is, I feel substantially different. It comes as an iteration of our time together in the studio on Fridays from 3 to 5, which we can't have anymore. So,
So what do you mean by iteration? Like, is
well, we're
this
going to
is
do
is
some of
this
it.
like a Pokemon like that's evolving, or is this the same thing
I
but
know.
different? Or
I can see the Pokemon. Yeah, but it's, you see, a Pokemon evolving usually is like a more powerful Pokemon, more. This is just a different Pokemon.
okay.
Uh, yeah, eventually the metaphor crumbles. But the idea is that there's something that we're gonna do here that we used to do there, which is
Hmm.
we're gonna build a project together as a team. I think this is the other thing that is slightly similar to that is that we welcome people to come and uh, watch us build this, but also eventually maybe even become part of the team, which is actually something that happened once in a while at the studio, right? A group of people would start building, two or three people would start building a project, and then somebody new would come to the studio and we're like, hey, why don't you just sit there and listen at first, and eventually they would become part of the team that was building the project. So that happened in real life. So the idea now is that we continue a little bit of that in this environment. But after that, this is where the similarities and the cool, interesting differences begin. Uh, so why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the things that we kind of talked about in terms of what we expect and to see coming from this exercise, and also uh, some of the
Well,
things that we found were unique about this.
we were talking about this kind of idea of something that we jokingly, but who knows, maybe it's a good term, that we had started calling gamer pedagogy, and we were trying to figure out what sorts of possibilities something called gamer pedagogy might provide. And we like that it has a certain it Twitch and streaming in general borrow from certain kinds of metaphors that are related to a classroom. The problem is that the metaphors that they're using are the kind of top-down hierarchical professor lecturing in front of a class of people, uh, that kind of a model of a classroom, which is not the best way for people to learn, especially these days. And like when you and I were talking about how to adjust the code of conduct for Twitch, the original code of conduct for the studio talks about doing things like making sure there's no front of the room and making sure that the tables so that there's no attention isn't focused on one specific person who's doing all the talking. Whereas here it is the two of us who are doing almost all the talking. And our like only um our saving grace is the presence of the chat room, which is sort of like students asking questions and that sort of thing. And I think that may help achieve some of our interests regarding flattening hierarchies and things along those lines. But then we also were talking about like how you could sell this sort of thing as a if you follow us for 5 weeks, you'll learn everything there is to know about JavaScript or something. I mean, that won't happen, but hypothetically. Or that we could do workshops or something and use it as take the pedagogical metaphor of the workshop and have people participate. Getting everyone to like share their screens or be able to get on the fly tech support is a different issue. I've done that with Zoom and it works okay, but Twitch is probably not the best thing for that. But I think it was you who said that maybe it's fun, useful, or community building to watch some of us just screwing around and maybe learn something like as a group. And I think that this is a good kind of project for that sort of thing, the Rose Hall project, because what we haven't really talked about yet, but this is the secondish iteration of this project. So it's not exactly that the first one failed. The first one is in perfectly great shape and has a lot of good things going for it. But we stopped working on it once quarantine kicked in and students had to move back home. Our undergraduate coder slash research assistant, I don't know exactly what Kristen's title was, but like moved back home, and so it was hard to have weekly meetings, et cetera, et cetera. Though she has kept working on the thing to some degree, and given this opportunity to try out this new thing, we said, well, let's just try to redo this, do it again, and see what it kind of looks like if we did it through Twitch and through the hypothetical contributions of people in the chat and so on, and from people who are watching what we do. I mean, it's we don't say things like this is easy. I know that you're very much against saying something is easy, or presenting some kind of a solution like, oh yeah, Omeka is easy, you'll figure it out in a day or something along those lines. And I'm a little bit more guilty of doing that, of saying those sorts of things, but only because I'm excited and want to share that excitement and whatever. But it's doable. So it may not be easy per se, but it's doable. And I think that is true. And I think that one of the good ways of proving that it is doable is precisely by showing it. Not just telling, not just writing tutorials, but actually showing the procedure. So yeah, was that too much? Excuse me.
There was a bit to unpack there, but I am going to just focus on the last thing, which is um, a good sort of concluding statement to why we are here. I don't think that what we're about to do is going to be enough so that you can become a full-blown producer of something similar to this by yourself, if you are just starting from scratch. But what I do think is that at the end of this process, if you're a super beginner, with the one thing that you would get out of season one would be at least to understand what are the different major parts that go into building a project of this kind. What are the considerations, the overall outline of what is involved in making a project of this kind? We're going
Hmm.
to go through a series of steps that are going to be kind of proto universals for this type of project. We're going to go through, considering the intellectual question to design, then we're going to build a rig for it. We're going to actually set up a rig on Git and Git using Git and GitHub on a sort of stable foundation of versioning. Uh, and it's so on and so forth. And all of these things, I think, are kind of proto universals of what you have to do behind the scenes in order to do this project. So if you come into this for the first time, at least you'll get a sense of the sort of the skills you might want to polish. After we're done with this season in order to actually get to the point where you can do this by yourself.
Right.
And which is a process that I never like. The part where you get to do this by yourself, like where you can troubleshoot any problems as they arise, involves like about 2 years of training in fundamentals before you can actually get to that part where you're like super independent. Minimum 2 years. So I don't want. That's why I always hesitate to oversell it to the super beginners. For intermediate people though, who have already had those 2 years, and they've already tried doing their own projects, I think this will be a good way of seeing how people who have been doing this for 10 years do it. People who have like really been in the trenches. Uh, how we actually learn to prioritize uh, certain ways of doing things, to do things faster, to do things with better outcomes in the end. We cut, unnecessary corners here and there in order to get things done. All of these kind of pro tips is something that I think will benefit a lot of the intermediary users. And of course, people who've been doing this, if anybody joins us who's been doing this at the production level for more than 10 years, like we know who you are. We love to have you here and hang out with us and heckle us and even join us on the call at some point if you are around on Fridays from 3 to 5.
Yeah, I think it's important to underscore that it's this isn't like watch a master chef cook. Like we're not Kenji here. Like we
Speak for yourself.
what's that?
Speak for yourself. I'm like super like.
Um but there's so we also make mistakes and will be making mistakes in front of everybody. We are lucky because we have the privilege to be able to make mistakes in public or make these kinds of mistakes in public. Um, and our hope is that in making these sorts of mistakes, will show, that will also encourage people who aren't super familiar with this sort of stuff. Um, so it will encourage them, but also that it will provide a space where when we hit dead ends and don't understand something, like perhaps that's when the classroom flips or whatever, and it's no longer us showing you how to bake a perfect cake, which doesn't rely on you the viewer at all, like you're a pure consumer. Instead will want to take suggestions for how to make the cake better. I don't want to push the cake metaphor too much, but my dissertation advisor on the syllabus always had something written about like no passive consumers, in the sense that like no one should come to class and be prepared to just do nothing. We can't and wouldn't make a similar kind of request of our audience, but I think it's a good way to sort of think about this, that by watching this, uh, implicitly you're offering to also engage as you see fit.
I like that. And I agree with you that actually Rose Hall will be a good one. it's a great pilot project to actually launch our studio remote, which hopefully will be with us even beyond the Rose Hall project. And and I think it's and I think it's a good one for this because it's the type of project that not only involves uh, some very handy technological skills. Uh, it also addresses a subject matter that is fundamental these days to all of us. A sort of recentering, reshaping of history and how history has been handed down to us uh, in the Black Atlantic. Uh, Full of gaps, full of violences, full of silences. That leaves us with an archive mostly written by the colonizers, by enslavers, by violent people. And then it behooves our generation, and I think our generation is doing a very decent job. And for example, shout out to our colleague Celia Hartman in the English department, who just became university professor, for being a pioneer in this sort of approach to the archive that we're hoping to continue. So we're hoping that not only will we attract with this season one people who are interested in learning the tech part, but also people who are interested in thinking through how we represent these gaps in the archive. How do we recenter the lives of the enslaved, their agency, their relationships, their joy and pain, even outside of that relationship of master and slave. So let's talk a little bit about the book that started it all.
Or about Rose Hall. Have you been to Rose Hall?
I have never been to Rose Hall.
The only place in the Caribbean I've been to is Punta Cana, so I've got nothing to say. But
Well,
you can describe it, right?
I cannot describe Rose Hall, though I've seen many pictures of it, and but I would recommend the audience to look out for Celia Naylor's book, which is coming out next year, called On Silencing Slavery, The White Witch and the Ghost Side, Sightings of Slavery at Rose Hall Plantation.
So who's the White Witch?
So that White Witch is apparently the main sort of mythical tale that is told to tourists when they come to Rose Hall Plantation. It's a tale of this lady, Annie Palmer, who was supposedly married to the plantation owner, but then in the mysterious circumstances, then disposes of him. She's really cruel but bitter and sad. And then after she passes, her spirit haunts the plantation. And this is the story that they tell visitors to the plantation until today. The plantation is owned by a tourist company that is owned by a Republican from Delaware or New Hampshire. I can't remember now. So it's full of this Americana kitsch sort of flavor that we have seen in Jamestown and we see in Disney recreations of the past and this kind of thing. So this is my sense that I'm getting just from reading the literature, because I haven't been to the tour of the context for this ghost story that is told to tourists in the evening schools, which has become like kind of the thing that the plantation then becomes known for. And this is the impetus, I think, for both Celia Naylor's scholarship and our own project here to try to wrest away the plantation from this mythical tale of this lady, who, by the way, it turns out didn't even exist, and recenter the lives of the enslaved at the plantation, like the people who really should be at the center of this story. When we look at a plantation, we shouldn't see a getaway holiday or an opportunity for a spooky story. We should actually confront the true horror here,
Right.
not the ghost of the White Witch.
Yeah, the spooky story isn't the woman who may or may not have disposed of her plantation owner husband, but rather the hundreds of lives of enslaved people that aren't even really given an opportunity to haunt, because their stories, the degree to which they can tell their own stories anyway, is already removed from them. Even within the context of this project, we're still relying on archival materials that were prepared by the plantation owners and the plantation staff. Um, I think, whatever there may exist in terms of these enslaved people telling their own stories about being in Rose Hall, it is outside of the scope of this project. Like it's not tied into the archival material that we currently have. And I just wanted to add that, like, in Professor Naylor's book, like, it opens with the description of going to Rose Hall with her 13-year-old daughter, who's like completely enraptured with the ghost story and all this sort of stuff. And I like that you said it's a Disneyification, because they even like set up these kinds of things. Like, there's a silhouette of a woman in one of the top windows that's always there, and so when you go there, they're like, oh, is that the ghost? And it's like, don't be ridiculous. It's like a piece of cardboard that you guys taped to the wall or to the window or something similar. Like, who knows? And just that this kind of um uh it's entirely turned into a kind of like marketing opportunity, and this opportunity to have this really weird relationship with this plantation that, again, does all this kind of silencing. I also think, like, Rose Hall and maybe even the Witch of Rose Hall is like featured in the latest season of Outlander, and has this kind of like popular cultural currency that continues to this day. And then just to sort of then talk a little bit more about specifically like the kinds of questions that Professor Naylor asks. I had these marked down, but now I might not be able to find them in time, just within the introduction. But yeah, let me skip that for now, and instead talk about something about the kind of archive. And here, Professor Naylor is talking about Christina Sharp's work, In the Wake, on Blackness and Being. Do you Can you say anything about this? I haven't read this book. Have you read it?
I haven't read Christina Sharp. I think we just outed ourselves as losers.
No, it's all right. We're doing a very specific part of the work here, and like reading the introduction uh, of the Rose Hall book, like I really got interested in this kind of idea. So this is the way that Professor Naylor describes it. Says that scholars from various disciplines have long examined the complexities of contemporary expressions and reconstructions of history, trauma, memory, and sufferation. So this again, you have like the kind of idea of like the trauma of a murder being like supplementing this other broader trauma of the uh, Atlantic slave trade. So in her book, In the Wake, on Blackness and Being, literary scholar Christina Sharp asks us to consider the various manifestations of being in the wake of the afterlives of slavery in this longue durée of Atlantic chattel slavery, the still unfolding aftermaths of Atlantic chattel slavery. And I really like that, because there's the sense of in the wake, and I'm sure that I'm not the one with this insight. I'm sure that this is brought up in the book, but there's in the wake here within the sense of being behind what a boat is doing, but also in the wake of this kind of like a wake for a departed family member or something along those lines. That there's this a little bit of tension in that term. Sharp not only explores her conceptualization of being in the wake, but also posits that we, quote, we might make the wake and wake work our analytic. We might continue to imagine new ways to live in the wake of slavery, in slavery's afterlives, to survive, and more, the afterlife of property. And then at the end, so then Professor Naylor describes the book, and this website is follows on to the work of the book. She writes, my project on Rose Hall consciously and purposefully moves in the direction of what Sharp expresses as wake work. In this endeavor, in the Rose Hall endeavor, wake work translates into attending and tending to the presentation and examination of the actual lives of enslaved people who lived and labored at Rose Hall, as well as attending and tending to the erasure and recasting of slavery and of Black suffering and survival in the contemporary tours at Rose Hall Great House. That part, that's for the book. We won't be working about that much. But it is acknowledging, as Sharp reminds us, that in the wake, the past is not past. The past that is not past reappears always to rupture the present. I think this this image of rupture or of a tear or a scar or a cut is something that we haven't talked about. We didn't talk about in version 1 of this project, and to think about the ways in which, from a design perspective and similarly, we can look at this project as either emphasizing that rupture, like emphasizing that tear, or providing something like a suture, like somehow a direction towards reassembling what's been torn apart. In this project, I consider what it means to be working in the wake of the archives, piecing together the threads of stories and the shards of evidence of enslaved people's lived experiences, as well as working to disrupt, interrogate, and rupture the erroneous representations of their lives in contemporary tours of Rose Hall. So I think that's enough reading for me from the introduction of the book, and I think that it was useful for me to look through this in preparation for today, just to sort of remember the kind of the stakes, that this isn't just a technological thing about how we're going to be showing, oh, this is how you make a JSON file, but also about like thinking in terms of ruptures and silences and traumas and the similar ways that history is just filled with this scattered pain, I guess.
Yeah, and I think actually, if you don't mind, uh, I wanted to show what Celia Naylor's original solution was to these issues, connecting rupture silences and making connections that again, where they were lost, um, and how that translates into sort of interactive visuals that we're going to try to build together in this coming weeks.
I think before we do that, we should talk a little bit about the archive itself, maybe to describe, because what you want to show already sort of explains what the data of the archival work is, right?
That sounds good. You have the spreadsheet open?
I will in a second. So so this is what Professor Naylor writes. With the legend and legacy of slave ownership at Rose Hall Plantation in mind, my archival investigation concentrates on the plantation in the early decades of the 19th century, ending in 1833 with the British Parliament's passage of the Slavery Abolition Act. I'm especially interested, Professor Naylor, I'm especially interested in unveiling the multifaceted aspects of enslaved people's lived experiences at Rose Hall, particularly enslaved women's quotidian experiences. So, so the concrete bibliographic stuff. The extant archival materials for this period, located in Jamaica's National Archives in Spanish Town and the National Library of Jamaica in Kingston, provided information about the workings of the Rose Hall plantation, such as the annual crop accounts and triennial registers of returns of slaves. Moreover, she writes, in my initial research trip to Jamaica's National Archives in Spanish Town, I uncovered a 3-volume set of weekly handwritten journal entries entitled the Rose Hall Journal, 1817 to 1832, penned by the white bookkeepers at Rose Hall Plantation. The time period of these journal entries coincidentally overlaps with Annie Palmer's time at Rose Hall, approximately from March 1820, when she married John Rose Palmer, until she left Rose Hall in 1829 or 1830, just a few years after John Rose Palmer's death in 1827. In addition, Professor Naylor examined the materials on Rose Hall and slavery in Montego Bay housed in England at the National Archives in Kew Gardens and the special collections of the University College London Library. And now I guess I will share the screen to sort of demonstrate what that looks like. So largely, I think this is the result of going through the journal of Rose Hall and figuring out what kinds of materials there are there. So I'm not sure what the archival process was. We haven't talked about it, but the result was this Google spreadsheet that lists, has a header, obviously, and I think there's 186, 209. That's more than I recall, but okay, let's say 209 separate people included in the comprehensive list of enslaved people at Rose Hall Estate from 1817 to 1832. And this includes people who are obviously already there in 1817, some of whom had been there or were very old already, and includes a not insignificant number of people who were born at Rose Hall Estate during these 20 odd years, 25 years. So the spreadsheet demonstrates the sorts of information that Professor Naylor was able to collect, which would be a name, other versions of the names, a kind of marital status, then country, color, and gender, as described in the tallies, and then the country and color are kind of interesting or are interesting places to begin to talk about, but I'll skip that for now because I want to get through this whole spreadsheet. And then their age in 1817, certain familial connections, which will become important later. And then just some descriptions about the person, how they arrived at Rose Hall, perhaps how they left, what their age is at different in later editions of the journal, and then what kinds of duties they had, what they worked at, what their condition was, what their disposition was, and what their valuation was in 1832. So this is the old St. James book that has supplemental information in it. And so this was when Professor Naylor approached us to start working on this project. This was what we had, was to turn what looks like a regular spreadsheet into something that tells a story and that can resonate appropriately with the ideas of rupture and trauma that we were discussing earlier and that appear in the book. So now, Alex, what did you want to? Now you take over. I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
So Mr. Pickles came in through the door. I didn't want him to bother our audience. But
Mr. Pickles' Twitch bombing is totally acceptable.
That's what you say. We don't play like that in my house.
All right.
The project had already been incubated as an idea at the Digital Humanities Center of Bonn before it came to us. It was a summer program they have there where they actually work with faculty. to encourage them to polish their ideas and even maybe build a small prototype. And this is Celia designed a series of drawings, representations of what she wanted. So by the time that she got to us, she had at least an idea in her mind of the sort of visuals that she wanted uh, to come from this data that would, for her, recenter the relationships of all of these people, both the ones that were born there and the people who were brought in. So this is the graphic I'm going to share with you because I found a copy of the original, really preparing for today. You can see it here. This is the drawing that she had when she first had the first meeting with us. I don't know if you remember. And everything revolved around this idea that she had of the community tree with concentric circles that would represent actually age groups. So that some of the people who have been there the longest would could be considered the sort of grandparents at the center of the community. And as you expand it out into the circles, uh, into the larger circles, you would get their descendants, their kids and their grandkids, etc. And this is how we started. We started with this idea that Celia brought to us that I think one way that we can fight against those ruptures, fight against uh, uh, these silences is to actually highlight the relationships, to highlight those family times. Um, and then that's what we started playing with her. We started even coming up with other ways in which we could add, subtract, uh, do different alternative things based on this data. And I think iteration number one, which you already mentioned, that we were working with Kristen, our student, actually takes a lot of that idea but pushes it in a different direction. And I think in the coming weeks, we will have a chance actually to reconstruct that work that you were doing with Kristen, and even perhaps continue to explore the different ways in which we can fight against these ruptures and these silences. And so also warning our audience that we're hoping to bring Celia in one of these episodes. Definitely on one of them she agreed on, but we're going to try to peer pressure her to come into a couple of the episodes so that we can have her be part of the brain trust that we use as we build different parts of this project together.
Yeah, I did want to return really quickly to talk about the DH Summer Institute at Barnard. Um, the Do you want to talk about it a little bit, or should I just
Go ahead,
guess
Water.
it?
Drink water.
Okay, so yes, this project started was a was part of the Summer Institute last year, so in 2019. And what the Digital Humanities Summer Institute is a grant funded project. They got a grant from the Council on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and additional support from the Consortium for Critical Interdisciplinary Studies and Alice Schreier, Barnard Class of '68. Um, and the way it works is to develop an annual institute that creates a community of digital scholarship practice at Barnard. So what they do is they bring together a group of people who importantly aren't are students, staff, and faculty to explore different DH projects that they have. And they get $500 to support the project costs. And then obviously consultations, et cetera, with the Barnard Digital Humanities Center. And mostly that meant working with the digital scholarship librarian at the time, Madiha Choksi, who's now here at Columbia. So this project on Rose Hall was one of those five, and the idea is that the institute enables researchers, it gives them the time and resources to explore new methods and processes and how to figure out ways to centralize questions of race, class, gender, sexuality, and disability in digital humanistic work, and to valorize, this is, I'm reading from the Summer Institute page here, paraphrasing also, and to valorize community-based work that is not often recognized as scholarship. So the sort of interesting thing about the Rose Hall project is that Professor Naylor always imagined it from the get-go with having this kind of public humanities aspect of it, namely in the context of this website. And this is brought up explicitly in the book as well as part of it's all part of one process. And I think that helps work with this idea of community-based work that is not often recognized as scholarship. I'm not sure what exactly the community is, but one problem is that these kinds of public humanities projects do often not count as scholarship in someone's tenure file, for example. But that's a story that I think is rather well known, and we don't need to rehash here. So that's the Digital Humanities Summer Institute at Barnard. So it was, and then on top of that, there was additional grant funding to pay for Kristen to learn about how to do the kinds of stuff that we will be doing here and to contribute to the project. Again, a lot of digital humanities projects don't have the luxury of that kind of funding and rely on kind of the goodwill of being able to exploit students or and try to, again, another story that we all know very well and don't have to rehash here.
You heard it here first, people.
Yeah, you heard it. You heard it here first.
Floating graduate students out there, we want you to stop doing that. We know that you like them for their data entry. No. That doesn't help them. That doesn't help them with their career. That only helps you. Stop it. We're seeing you. We're watching.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, especially, can you work for free on this thing that doesn't even go in my tenure file?
Yeah, good times. The old digital humanities. That's what they call the traditional digital humanities. I think that's
the tradition of it goes. It goes back to
what we're
Father
doing.
Busa. Father Busa was exploiting graduate students.
Oh, for real? He was the original gangster. All right, so I think we covered more or less all the background. I think talked a little bit about the book, talked a little bit about the history of what brought us here since the Summer Institute last year until the present. Talked a little bit about the intellectual background, the sort of more global context for this type of project. Did we leave anything out?
I think we've said a ton already.
Yeah, I think so. So I think it's time to start doing the thing. So before we start, actually, there was one thing more that I wanted to say, and that is, unless it wasn't evident already, none of this is scripted. Absolutely not a single thing is scripted. There are.
That doesn't mean unstructured. It just
that
means
doesn't mean
unscripted.
unstructured. And that doesn't mean also that we don't bring this into this, what Bethany Novinsky and the Scholars Lab group and others call tacit knowledge. We already kind of don't even notice how we assume there are things that we should all take for granted. We don't, or at least I don't, but that actually help structure us as we go. So don't worry, we won't let you. We actually trust ourselves enough to know that we probably have a product. We'll probably have a project by the end of this, even though the course to get there is completely unscripted and uncharted. We have done this before.
Well, yeah, and Calmer92 in the chat asks about whether version 1 of the Rose Hall project is public. It is. I don't think it's a private repository on my GitHub. I'm not positive. There isn't a ton there that we will not recreate extremely quickly. um, just for various reasons it was a slow process, um, which isn't a critique. It was just slow, and again, I think that we will recreate it rather quickly. Um, but it also helps because we're new to this whole streaming thing. We're new to doing this sort of stuff in public, and being able to uh, like I said, it's unscripted, but that doesn't mean unstructured. And one of the structures are that we not only have done this before in the sense of making a project before, but we've also done this before, as in working specifically with this data before. So we'll be able to lean on that a little bit while we're getting our own feet wet.
Yeah. And we actually count on, we hope that those of you watching us live on Twitch, but also after on YouTube, will reach out to us
Mhm.
and chip in, help in, and let us know eventually if one of you feels comfortable jumping in. Let us know that too. So,
Yeah,
all right,
and definitely to tell us what we're doing incorrectly, and to offer uh, solutions, because we're, you know, just because, like I said already, we have the privilege of being able to fail in public, doesn't mean that we don't also benefit from uh, having those failures turn into successes.
absolutely, yeah. I don't have the privilege of failing too much. I
Yeah.
understand that some people in the humanities can fail a lot, but I can't. So don't let us.
Yeah, it's well, it's a continuum. Everyone can fail a little, and some can fail a lot, and
Yeah.
we're probably more on the a lot side of things, I
I
think.
can't even win up. So fail up is completely out of the
that's
equation.
not that's not what I mean. We can discuss that offline, like what I mean concretely.
All right. Just gotta, you gotta let me get in my social commentary if we're gonna be live.
No, it's all right. That's what puts the butts in the seats, is people want to hear, people want to be here to wait for you to say something that'll get you canceled.
Good times. All right. So, Moacir, whenever we get a project for the first time or we sit down to actually implement it, what is the first thing we do?
Talk trash about the faculty member.
Okay, good point. But I'm not gonna do it about Celia. She said she's
Yes.
the best.
Shake our heads at the ridiculous request.
This one is fantastic, so we don't need. We can skip
We
that
don't need
part.
to do, yeah, we don't have to do that either. All right, you've got me. What do we do?
We wanna first scope it out. We wanna make sure that we draw boundaries around.
Yes.
I like to do that by starting by drawing some of the sort of site tree.
I didn't realize you were using the royal we. It's saying what do we like to do, as in what do I, Alex, like to do? Because I don't like scoping things. I'm a big fan of scope creep.
You
I like starting with little things and then have them go completely out of
scroll.
control. All
So
right. So
no,
how do you
absolutely
scope
not.
things? How do you scope things?
So first, let's talk about what are the parts of this project that we really, really, really must do. So
Are you writing this down, or am I writing this down?
I can write it. I can write it down. So
I'm all set up to do writing.
you are? Well, then
Yeah.
go ahead. Take a sip.
All right. So let me dun, 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 dun,
See,
dun, dun, dun.
Moacir sometimes, to those listening at home, it's sometimes hard to know whether Moacir is joking or not. Don't listen to him about he doesn't like to scope. What like who likes scope creep? Nobody likes scope creep. It don't listen to him.
I mean,
Well,
I'm
I'm not. At least I am definitely not listening to him because scope creep is bad no matter what. anybody says.
All right.
Somebody, some
Rose.
kid listening said, like, Moacir said the Scope Creek was cool.
No one's gonna say that. We don't have to worry about it. Okay, so
All right. So things that are within our scope. Obviously, a visualization. Okay. At least one. Yeah. We want to include all of the peoples in this register. We want to make sure all the lives in that register are accounted for in what we do.
okay.
We want to make sure that whatever we do, it centers them. That it is about them. And even as little as information as we have.
Let's say that again. It's a little what?
As little information as we have, and as biased as it is, because it is told from the point of view of the sort of capitalistic accounting practices of enslavers. We want to make sure that we still center their lives. So as much as we can intuit, all right. And a more banal level, I think we need an about page to orient people. Yeah. I think we should do this. Did we agree that we wanted to do something mobile first and fully responsive, or did we? You want to make a decision now?
Uh, we we were of multiple minds of it about it. Like we were very hesitant, but I think now we're more comfortable with doing something like that.
So
So
mobile first. All right.
mobile first, and then what else? So what does mobile first mean,
Oh,
and why
everybody.
is it important?
For the so first, even before we define mobile first, let's define this other word called responsiveness. Responsiveness means that your
Well,
website is going to.
hold on. Give me a sec, because I'm sharing my whole screen, so that means that I can people can watch me Google alongside what
Okay.
you're saying. So let me just make a new browser window, bring it over here. Okay, now talk to me about responsive design.
So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the project, the digital website full of web pages, works on your mobile phone. Not exactly the same as on your laptop, but that it works. That at least that you are able to achieve some of the same narrative goals on the phone that you can achieve on the laptop. This is particularly difficult when we're talking about visualizations like maps or these kind of network graphs or funky graphics because of the zooming in and out, because of the limited real estate on the phone. Um, but we already have discussed this one in particular, so we have some solutions that you're going to hear about shortly. But in any case, though, mobile first then becomes a strategy by which one achieves that responsive design. And the strategy is build the thing first for the phone, and then after you build it for the phone, then add the things in the style sheet that you will need in order to make it work on a laptop too. So this is because actually this makes a lot of sense when you actually in practice you notice that it actually it's easier to do it that way than to actually try to fit whatever you built for the laptop back into the phone. I think the reason why it works, for me, still like magic how it actually does work in real life practice. And I think maybe, but if I think about it for 2 seconds, it's probably because it's such a smaller space that actually cramming things into a smaller space is actually harder than actually expanding things from a smaller space into a bigger one. That would be my intuition about why this actually does work in real life, kind of like magic. But go ahead, Moacir, if you actually know the real answer for why it's better
No,
to.
I think to me always it's I agree. Like I mobile first makes sense to me because it forces you to foreground the hardest part. Like, you know, they say like column inches are free on the internet, and it's after fashion pixels are free too if you have a computer. If you have a phone, then pixels are not free. And it's very important that you uh, cram the into the phone screen as much as you can, but without it looking crammed. And I think you see my screen, right? So you can see this picture here that Wikipedia has, and I think that this does a very good job of showing what the problem is. Like the blue area we can think of as being the main content, and it's big on the screen. Like these pictures obviously aren't even to scale, and even so, like the monitor is actually much bigger than the tablet or the phone. And even here with it proportionately smaller, still the blue area is the largest area. And so you just have all this space for your content to tell your stories and all this sort of stuff. Whereas on the phone, you have much less. So you can see things like sidebars get pushed down to the bottom of the page, and you just have your title, or you have the ubiquitous hamburger menu, the three lines that go across the title. And but you know, while you were talking, I was kind of um, uh, looking at this paragraph here on Wikipedia, and I kind of like this. Browsers of basic mobile phones do not understand JavaScript or media queries, so a recommended practice is to create a basic website and enhance it as you go up. So this is the reverse of what you like to talk about, which is graceful degradation, or talking about like kind of the making sure that the ruins of a project exist to um, uh, that can be approachable and accessible by nearly anyone. This starts with approachable and accessible by nearly anyone, and then add features as you know for doing other sorts of things. So in that sense, one of the reasons you do mobile first is because if there's going to be a browser that doesn't understand um, what a media query is, that browser is likely to be on like a Nokia from 2005. So that's what you want to design for. And there's usability benefits for this, of course, because you want your site to be usable to as many people as possible. But there are other benefits too. Like, why would we be interested for the Rose Hall project for making it mobile first?
The reason is simple: is that actually
Or
those
another reason.
mobile devices are actually one of the most common ways to access the internet on the Caribbean itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a lot of sense that we do that. And if this site is actually going to play a role in interrupting the way that tourism is taking place at Rose Hall, having the thing work on a phone, which is the only device you're going to be carrying with you while you're at Rose Hall, is actually going to deliver on that promise.
Mm-hmm.
So even a little bit more pointedly. So I think it's very important that for this particular project, we do responsive and mobile first. Now that said, even though yes, I like to build ruins, I don't like to build uh, Gothic cathedrals that must be maintained constantly in order for them to look like Gothic cathedrals after 800 years. By building ruins directly, we can move on with our lives. You know me, I've talked about minimal computing already, many platforms. You'll probably hear me once in a while jump in with a couple of concepts from that world. And in this case, I think we should at least take from that world this idea that we build ruins. That said, it is not for every project, because there are some projects that I actually don't think should be built as ruins, even though if we shorten the amount of time that these projects might stay alive, in a sense, in their full glory. Sometimes that is worth it. So sometimes you want to do projects that you know are not going to decay gracefully, but at the same time you're not signing up for 10 years to maintain them alive. But for that brief period of 5 years, you can really explore that complexity in that part. Just wanted to point that out in case I get typecast as somebody who just builds uh, simple ruins.
I think that the important so there are a couple of things there. So let me type these up. So mobile first, because phones are what people use in the Caribbean to access the internet mostly.
Commonly,
What's that?
commonly enough.
Most commonly, whatever. That's no good.
Yeah, that works.
All right. Then two is because it's good design philosophy.
For this project.
But no, in general,
Hmm.
I think. Um, three, because we want something that is accessible to all rather than something that degrades gracefully. Minimal computing, right?
Yeah.
But challenges. How do we do a visualization? How do we do that? How do we make an interactive visualization for 206 people that works on old smartphones?
Yeah, no, forget about the old smartphones. No way. The answer is no.
No, excuse me. I wouldn't say no way. I would say this is a challenge. Now, we're talking about how it's a good design philosophy in general, and we're talking about how we want something that's accessible to all. Oh, that reminds me, there's number 4 here. Um, bringing into Rose Hall when you want to interrogate its the representation of the site sold to you by the tourism bureau, whatever. Okay. So if we're saying that it's important to do these sorts of things as mobile first because they're more accessible, then you can't just say like, oh yeah, if you have an old phone, then you're just out of luck.
I said it. I don't
I
mind.
know you said it. You don't. But then what are you saying? Like on the one hand, you want it to be mobile first because you want something that's accessible, etc. But then you're like, but we're gonna have a limit here where you have to have like at least an iPhone SE or the
Yes, yes. I am saying that there is no such thing as universal accessibility, and that this document is called scope, and
okay.
that this, because we have to balance. We have to balance. our best effort to make things this accessible beyond just simply making something for a laptop, and the fact that we need to get it done, and that we shouldn't build something so complex that it breaks and that it needs constant maintenance. If you can right away, can you imagine us being able to do this? Because you and me know what the available technology is. How are we going to do this? You had to put a question mark and an exclamation point twice in there, because you know that this actually is a bottleneck. Uh,
Not a bottleneck per se, but is a challenge for sure.
Tell you what, we can try, but we can try for a very finite period of time, because time is always, we're always fighting against time when we're doing projects.
Right.
So, but to be clear, I personally do not believe that there's no such thing as universal accessibility, and I do not try to, and I don't kill myself over that. I don't bemoan that fact too much, that much that I stay awake at night,
Mm-hmm.
because there is no universal accessibility. We do the best we can depending on the situation. In this case, we're making sure that at least we cover mm, the largest chunk of mobiles that are likely to be held in the hands there that visit uh, uh, this place, or that are in the hands of academics who usually have not the oldest phone, but something like this, because they're middle class folks. The Caribbean, the academics are also middle class. The Caribbean, so that is enough for me. That is good enough for me. Like
So that baseline isn't Commodore 64, something like that. Like that there are limits you run into, and I know that this is true. Like um, you can set up Babel, the JavaScript, like I don't know, transpiler. You can set it up so that it recompiles the JavaScript that you write to be accessible to specific browsers. And you can set up rules like only browsers that are used by at least 1% of the population, of the internet browsing population as of, August 2019, or at least 1% as of August 2018, or that kind of stuff, or at least 0.4% of internet browsing is done. So there are ways in which this is sort of answered ahead of time for us. um, but I do know that the just the jump from the from the iPhone 4S, which is what I had until 3 years ago, to the iPhone SE was pretty remarkable in terms of screen size. And so what you could do to build a website based on that. And then the current iPhone SE was even bigger still. And it's a little bit interesting to me because if you, for example, on Chrome, I can't reproduce the old iPhone SE. I can only yes, I can't reproduce the old iPhone SE. I can only reproduce the current iPhone SE, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, and look, remember also that I actually, the first time that we started thinking about mobile first for the first iteration of this, I said that we shouldn't even have the graphic on the phone,
Right, right.
that we should only have the names of the people.
Well, that's part of the question is, and that's, you know, if the answer is how do we make an interactive visualization for 206 people that works on old smartphones, the answer to that can be we don't. And then, but
Yeah.
then, that doesn't mean that we just walk away. That need to imagine something else. Like if you look here, this is what I was talking about, like on this um X app emulator. that lets you tend to run an iPhone on your computer. Uh, the best solution that isn't just literally launching a website on your phone that your website will look like on a phone. And the oldest phone here is the iPhone X generation, which is the as is the iPhone 8. So the phone I bought in 2018 is no longer officially on this list. That's I'm a little sad.
This is we're librarians. We have to learn how to live with loss. Uh,
Yeah.
even inside a project of rescue, even inside of recovery, of restitution, of recentering. Uh, so
Yeah. So in the chat, CS Bailey asks, given the technical limits, when does it make sense to offer different experiences for different hardware, software, such as interactive text tables, full-fledged interactive maps for others? And I think this is what we're sort of talking around right now. Is you know, this has always been a problem for this project, and we don't have the best solution yet, because then wouldn't it be the case logically that we should start with that least technically complex version of the site and only move to the visualization later? And what is guiding the fact that we're working on the visualization first as opposed to the like least technologically taxing version of the site? That's a question.
well, if we look at the same document that we were just writing, I think I made a mistake by putting number one being like making a visualization, because I think the number one requirement
Okay.
within the scope is actually centering the lives of these folks. And this is, I think, part of the thinking that went into that first conversation we had
Can you
about
wait?
whether
Can you say that? Sorry, Alex. Can you say that again? What's the most important thing?
centering the lives of the enslaved at Rose Hall Plantation.
Got it.
That is
Yes.
literally the most
Right.
important thing in the scope. Like,
Yeah.
forget everything else. This is this has to be part of the process. And I think what happened there, I think the answer to that question, which is a very general way of framing it, like trying to come up with a rule for how one distinguishes this thing, I think it's like, are you able to achieve your number one goal even with two different products? I think the answer sometimes is yes. Sometimes it's no. But I think if the answer is yes, then you have to consider then, I mean, what would be the benefit of doing two products or not? Am I being stopped from achieving the number one goal because I must have one product? Like, will I end up without a project at all, just simply because if the answer is like, oh yeah, I just won't do it, maybe it's worth reconsidering, this kind of like the dominance of the one experience for everybody that has to be the same. I don't believe that the experience should be the same for everybody in every project. And I know this is going to be recorded, so let me just use and I know this is as an anonymous public, so let me just be careful about the way I phrase this. But I've worked on a project in a country. Some of you who know me have seen the project. I worked in a country in a project that has heavy censorship. And the project involved some photographic evidence that would have made the government very anxious. So we did two versions of the project. One in which we actually released a copy to the internet that would pass the censors of the government. And another copy of the project that would actually circulate within the university itself for students and faculty in the university, in the main university of this country, for them to really explore that historical moment through those photographs, to explore the full archive of that historical moment. So we built a project that had two different versions, two different products, right? So I never hesitated that this is what should have been done. I don't think that this like experiences should be universal, should ever be a part of any thinking that you do uh, in digital humanities, unless the specificity of that project calls for. And I don't think I think that's I think that's the question you have to answer based on what I said first, which is like, is your main goal satisfied? Um, if you depends on how you answer that question. I don't know. That was a little rambling, but I just I just wanted to put it out there that I have a guttural reaction against this kind of universalist forms of thinking,
Yeah, I mean,
universal solutions, universal protocols for how to do these things.
yeah, this is probably going to be a running bit on this show because of not the fact that I'm a huge universalist, but I'm more of a universalist than you are, and
Yeah.
I think I bring out the anti-universalist tendencies in you. So you know,
Yeah.
that it works out that way. But no, I agree that like we you said when we started with this project that it wouldn't be possible to have the visualization on some phones or on phones at all, and I said basically challenge accepted, and I think that it will be possible to do something. We just have to figure it out. Like I don't want to cross it off right away, and but at the same time you're also right to say that we shouldn't get lost in the weeds trying to solve a problem that we created for ourselves.
Correct. So I
Or
propose.
we should be smart about when and how we choose to do that.
So I propose that we actually leave that complexity, park that complexity of solving for the phone, for the visualization for later, and go back at least for the duration of season one. Go back to this idea of not showing the visualization at all, but actually showing the people on the phone, which is the sort of ruins of all of this, is the actual names of the people with what little we know about them. Where you click on one name, first you have a list, and when you click on one name, you learn more about them. Who are they related to? Because
Yeah.
that's we're not only highlighting, I think, to capture the spirit of Celia's original sort of image and idea for this project is to not only highlight the people, but highlight their lives, and relationships do a lot of that,
Right.
of highlighting our relationships to each other, our kin relationships to each other. So I think if we can do that in a text-based way on the phone, uh, and then, but also on the phone, we would build out also the structure of the overall site, right? The menu, the footer, the header, all of these things were already that we would be building for the phone. So
Right.
by the end, we would have a very like the skeleton of the whole thing. And then we can transition to laptop to take that data and then see what the visualization would look like. And then at the end, revisit the phone maybe. Uh,
Okay, so I like how that sounds, and I so more pages. Let me just draw out then a uh, uh, route map, I guess. Um, so we start with mobile site that centers people, desktop site that introduces visualizations, return to mobile site to think about how visualizations can come to them or can come to the phone. Something like that, right?
yeah.
All right, I like that. Okay, so
And we
more
could
page.
dedicate one episode to banging our heads against the wall for the last one towards the end. But I think the public by then will appreciate. I think our colleagues, our students watching by then would know enough about the project that it doesn't feel like it's in the weeds, that it feels like we're actually trying to solve. They understand the data by then. We all understand the data. We understand what the visualization that we come up with for desktop or visualizations are. And by then it's just like, okay, we're going to try to solve this one challenge. I think also that would be a great opportunity if we do fail for me to spend the last 20 minutes of that doing my spiel about what to do when you fail. That so anyways, yes, this sounds great.
I did like a little pamphlet that says, "Congratulations, you just failed. What's next?"
All right, so this sounds great. So I think actually we never came up with a strategy for how we're going to do like a
no, wait. We still have, so you said an about page, but that's not the only page.
Right. Why don't you create a category here for the pages we want?
Well, I mean, this is part of the scope. So like
we want a page with an essay by Celia.
So we have about page to orient visitors.
Yeah. We want a sort of a multimedia essay by something I think that's super within scope. It's not hard to do, where she can write it in Microsoft Word and send it to us, and we'll she tells us where, like video, sound, maybe the kinds of things she can't do in the book. She can then use some of that kind of temporal media here that a book doesn't allow for.
Yeah.
And we can convert it then into, we can convert it to Markdown, HTML, whatever we need to bring it into.
I wouldn't sweat that, but go ahead.
Yeah. And so about page credits, obviously you need that credits page. Everything we do at the lab is cognizant of labor. We try always to, for those people who use graduate students, we always try to credit each other in everything that we do. Make the labor visible. Of course, that doesn't mean that that's how we pay people. Just we're watching it.
Yeah, we're getting paid for this. So.
We are getting paid for this, people. Yeah, don't work for free. Unless you yourself are going to use
no, we're like, but that goes in with the what I've been coming back to all the time about this privilege of failing. Like we're definitely privileged in the sense that we are allowed to be on the clock chit-chatting on Twitch about a project that we've already more or less built while on the clock. And it's important to acknowledge that kind of privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is obviously amazing.
There's definitely one more page missing. It starts with a B, ends with bibliography.
Yes. Oh man, Jerome again would cancel me if he
bad librarian.
If he was hearing me right now, my mentors, Bethany Novinsky, all of them, so disappointed in their students.
Calmer 92 asked on chat about having a AR, an augmented reality version of the site for use while at Rose Hall. This is definitely something that museums are looking into in a lot of detail. I have no experience with it. I've never actually even really used AR because when Pokemon Go was a thing, I had my phone was too old to use it. So I still never have used Pokemon Go. I guess I've messed around a little with filters on Snapchat or something, but yeah, my relationship to AR is extremely limited, and I think that would be great. It may be tricky to do without full without having collaboration from Rose Hall itself, / without like now I'm actually imagining like guerrilla AR, like someone goes on the Rose Hall tour and with a GPS, which is to say with their phone, and takes a bunch of pictures and stuff and uses that to compile an AR environment for people who then come and then get like quote unquote the real tour. I think that sort of thing would be possible, but unfortunately, it's we have no experience with that, and definitely wouldn't be able to ship something with that by January-ish, which is when we hope to ship this.
Yeah, but I actually do happen to know that the Guerrilla AR is super possible. There are tools that allow you to slap your own annotations on anything.
Hmm.
Of course, the challenge of these tools is that they work kind of like social media. So in order for people to know that they could actually activate this layer on their phones, they have to know about the tools themselves. So they have to be a user of that tool in order to be able to tap into those layers of annotation where you don't need to ask permission from the Rose Hall plantation owners. In fact, I think the plantation owners, like I said, they're a reactionary group
Yeah,
focused on selling you fantasies about the place.
yeah,
So they wouldn't be amenable to sort of like the kind of historical restorative work that we're doing here. This is not selling the wonders of Rose Hall. This is condemning the sort of history behind. So uh, guerrilla AR has to be the way to do this. And I think maybe one of the possibilities, because we still remember we're still also working out how we're going to do our weekly show, but we've already talked several times that about having guests and things like this. So one of the things that we might actually do is like even in the middle of doing this project, we could probably bring in somebody for half an hour and an hour to talk to us a little bit about guerrilla AR and also other possibilities around Rose Hall that go beyond what we're doing here. That's totally a possibility. And I know we have some students watching in from Jamaica in the show. So this is an opportunity perhaps also to connect to classroom at UWimona. Moacir?
yeah. No, no. Yeah, because I was actually thinking about this in terms of like concretely in terms of AR last night. I think while thinking about like ways of. Oh no, sorry. While reading the introduction, that's what it was. So however many days ago that was, I was reading the introduction. I'm like, this whole project should just be like an AR thing. And then I was like, yeah, but then it's like an app you have to download and all this sort of stuff. Like it like my to the degree that I guess the biggest way I deal with AR now is through QR codes, in the sense of you just point your phone at something and you don't even have to take a picture or anything like that. Like the phone already recognizes that there is content there and downloads the content from the QR code. So yeah, like that sort of stuff Rose Hall would never do. But if there's like a geocaching app or something that I just don't know about, I mean, I'm sure there is, that like what you're saying, then it already taps into this kind of guerrilla AR community that's already doing this sort of stuff. And that would be interesting. For us, we couldn't obviously do it in Jamaica. Our privilege only goes so far, but it would be something to think about to do for uh, New York for us for later. But yeah,
Yeah, good times. Thank you for the suggestion. I'm gonna get to work on that next week. I'm gonna see if I can find us somebody in the DH in my DH world that actually knows how to do this well, just to talk to them, see what happens.
yeah.
All right, so
So
I think that's
credits,
it. Masir, in terms
bibliography.
of our scope.
We also in version 1 we talked about making the actual archival materials available, like pictures of the actual documents. But
That's going to stay out of
that
scope for this one because there were several
yes, yeah,
challenges. So Celia wanted to share some of the original documents.
or
They're
all of them actually, but yeah,
Yeah, but they're in an archive
two different archives.
in two different archives, and one of them was not happy with the idea of sharing the.
Well, both of them
Original.
had restrictions.
It was both of them. If I
Yeah,
recall well.
yeah. Kew Gardens wanted um they they don't want, if I remember correctly, they were fine with making reproductions, etc., of the documents for a fee. They just didn't want, again, if I'm wrong, like, I don't think this is a bad position of theirs. This is just the position I remember. They didn't want this project to become sort of like the go-to repository for those documents or those images, right?
Right.
Because there was something about like we could only use the images on the website if they were like of a lesser quality, et cetera, et cetera. And I read that as meaning like they want to make sure that they remain the like primary trust
Right.
of the digital images representations of these paper documents, right? That whatever this web page would have would always be a degraded facsimile of some sort. um, and then Spanish Town, that's an entirely different story,
Yeah,
right?
and also something I think this is and the experience I've had
That's
working in the Caribbean.
The Jamaican archives in Spanish Town. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead. In Kingston.
because I mean, part of those who know me know that I've been dedicating most of my professional life in part to sort of nurturing a sort of that space of Caribbean digital humanities and thinking around new media in the Caribbean. We have the journal, Archipelagos Journal.org. We have the conference called the Caribbean Digital. It's now going to be on the 7th iteration. Um, I can share those links on the chat. But this is has been part of my world, my professional world for many years. And I think part of my experience in the Caribbean has involved this kind of negotiations with archives in the Caribbean who go through these same, they have this same reactions whenever you ask them to share their images of their archival collections. There some countries and some archives in the Caribbean that are notorious for this more than others. And I'm not going to name names, but I've also come to sympathize and understand why. The reason why for many of them is that a lot of these archives depend on what we can call scholarly tourism. They depend on the fact that American scholars, even if it's diaspora scholars, I'm from the Caribbean myself. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. I came here as an immigrant, as an adult to the United States. Uh, but even if we're diaspora, even if we are from the Caribbean, we still bring dollars when we come back to. Oh, Moacir sharing the site for the conference and the journal. Uh, in any case. Uh, these dollars that we bring when we come to visit, these are important sources of income sometimes for these archives. And sometimes you get grants and fellowships that actually depend on this kind of travel there, where the archives receive money. And as we know, they have a lot less money than some of the archives around here in the continental US. So you can't be mad at them too much for not sharing, allowing us to copy and share these materials online. And thanks, Moacir, for putting those links there. And
No problem.
so anyway, so yeah, so we can't, yeah, part of the original scope or the original dream was to be able to also create a sort of digital repository of the documents themselves. So not only would we be able to actually experience, the center the lives of the slaves, we could actually go and visit the original documents, uh, the ledgers, but also some letters and some other historical documents that are in these archives. And that's not going to be possible. It's also probably not recommended for us in the period of time we gave ourselves for season number 1, which is just the duration of this year, to actually do that too. So even if that would have been possible, it probably would have not been wise for us to also sign up to do that in the time that we're going to be together for season one. So that might happen in the future if we can work out permissions and stuff like that. But out of scope also for this one. Also, by the way, because I know some of you are completely new to our jargon, Moacir, what is scope creep? Since I think our audience heard us talk about a scope and scope creep at the beginning of this conversation. What is scope creep, Moacir?
Scope creep is, I mean, there's probably a Wikipedia page for it, but
There is, there is.
there is.
Yes, I'll share
Well,
it.
instead of reading the Wikipedia page, I'll try and paraphrase it as I understand it. Scope creep is when you start a project and the boundaries of the project are not clear, and so they keep changing, and as a result the project keeps changing and morphing into things that typically the reason why scope creep is bad is because you lose sight of the original thing you were supposed to solve, but you also lose you just end up with something that's very confused and doesn't achieve any goal. um, the I guess like one of the best examples of scope creep in history was the Whitewater investigation that ended up with the impeachment of Bill Clinton. But that was an example of that. Is that the scope of the investigation kept changing, as because it was politically motivated, and the goal was to get Clinton, not to actually solve the problem or to see if there were indictable crimes related to the Whitewater real estate deals. um, and so it's the same thing with any kind of project, like if you're writing a paper, for example, you can get, oh, I thought you were going to put scope creep on the screen, not just paste the link in
Oh,
into
in the
chat.
chat.
Yeah. When you're writing a paper, back when I was an undergrad and didn't take paper writing seriously, I very often had something resembling scope creep, because I would need to write a 5-page paper on Rousseau or whatever, and I would just be like typity, 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 and then on page 5, it took me until page 5 to figure out actually what I wanted to say. But at that point, I already had 5 pages, and I'm like, forget it, I'll just turn this in. So that's what I was doing there. Is I was engaged, like I took the opportunity of turning in a paper as drafting a scoping document where I figure out what the goal of this paper is, and then that's what I would turn in, as opposed to a paper that actually achieved that goal. And then once even if you have that, and this is the famous, this is why there's that adage about the best dissertation is the finished dissertation, because it's very easy to have the scope of your dissertation change and creep and get larger. And to this day I still have like, oh, I just need to read one more book, or I just need to read one more article, or I just need to follow one more footnote, or I just need to have a better sense of this one term. And the you just get more and more pushed away from actually getting it done. So that's why I think it's not fair to say that I hate scope creep, because scope creep is very much part of my internal DNA. But my what I do from 2 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the morning is not important for this Twitch. But yeah, I
So
guess I guess saying I spend 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. every night scope creeping sounds really creepy.
sounds a bit creepy, a
Yeah,
little cringe.
a little creepy. Yeah.
The
That's
the
not the
example
first
that
or
you
last
use,
time there's going to be cringe here. So
absolutely not. The the example you use is much safer than mine, because I always use the example of the dissertation. Everybody, whenever they start writing their dissertation, it is just a hot mess of scope creep. Eventually, if you have good advisors, that scope creep eventually gets scoped down, where you are actually contained and end up doing something. And actually, we do know this, we all know that person uh, that person that probably was a really close friend that actually dragged on a scope creeping for years on their dissertation,
And didn't finish.
and didn't finish. And that, I mean, for me, the reason why I resist scope creep is because I like to have projects that are done. I love done projects. It is like one of my favorite things in the whole world. So, anyways, for the last, we have 15 minutes more or less left for our first episode. I'm actually uh, quite happy with the way this first episode turned out. I mean, we covered a lot of territory. Um, I wanted to talk about uh, in that document that you start creating, list out the actual technologies that we're going to be using, name them. Especially, and one of the reasons I want to do this as part of the scope document is I actually, just in case our viewers want to see exactly like what are the things that we're going to be covering, uh, that we're definitely going to be looking at, especially if some of you are approaching this as a sort of workshop or opportunity to actually start exploring some of these technologies. This is, I think, a list. We kind of know more or less what are the things that are going to be involved in this one, mostly because we did the first iteration. So we don't have to go through that process of choosing what technologies we're gonna be using. We kind of know for this one because we're gonna be using exactly the same ones we were using for the first iteration. Uh, we're not gonna relive that conversation about what made us choose them. I just want to just say really briefly that
Well,
probably
not here and now, but later that will
right.
come up.
We might revisit as we do them. Like why? Yeah, actually, some of them are not the best for what we're about to do, but they're also not bad. So at no point did we pick like the worst technology.
Yeah.
All right.
And we also maybe it would make sense to talk about alternatives also, like
Right.
to list what we're actually going to be using, and but also talk about paths we didn't take but that we think would have been perfectly fine, you know.
Yeah, and this is why, like for example, I just described like just three things, like name of technology, the role it's playing, and then the alternative. So one is, for example, right there on Moacir's microphone, it's Ember.
SpawnCon.
Yeah, which Moacir, I hope he's getting a commission
You
from
bet it.
the
You
Ember
bet.
people.
The Ember people are giving me tons of money.
Because that mic is just that product placement there is amazing. Like in every episode, we're gonna have this product placement. But Ember is a nonprofit. Uh, I don't even know if they're if they have an organization. It's an open
Eh,
source.
they're nothing but profit for me, man. I'm making that money.
So Ember is what I would call a frame.
Framework.
They're gonna provide the sort of skeleton, this infrastructure for where we're gonna put all our different parts. Uh, so they're the mold. I don't know, Moacir, you want to describe it? You want to use any analogy here that you think is serves a good pedagogical purpose?
Well, framework is the good thing. Like the Ember could be it. Like so alternatives would be something like Rails, um, Django, um,
Jekyll.
Flask, Jekyll,
Yeah.
Hugo, I guess, or no, Hyde,
Yeah.
no, Hugo.
It's called Hugo. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hyde is a theme for Jekyll.
Hyde is the theme. Yeah, right. Um, so what it does is it creates the it makes what everything in the site is there to do. So let's do this way. So uh,
It comes with a lot of pre-built parts.
could
Can
be
we say that?
sufficient for the entire project.
Yeah.
Introduces, so the main thing that it does is it, or the main things that it does is it builds a deployable web application. And by deployable, we mean easy to put on the internet and change quickly. So this is
Scaffold for a building, like before you put
sure.
the windows and before you put the walls and the painting, you have a scaffold.
Yeah.
So this is what this is. I think it's a good way to
Yeah.
think about it.
It
Uh,
it defines and relies on the relationships between atomic entities in the project. And this is a term I talk about all the time, about atomic entities.
I think it's too jargony, but that's just.
Well, it's I mean it's a term that, as far as I know, I like made it up.
Oh, if you made it up, then yes, I here
I
to
mean,
support you.
it's definitely jargony, like, but that's why I'm in the middle of about to type a definition for it. So an atomic entity is what is the uh, uh, most basic element of importance to the site. So here it's an enslaved person from Rose Hall. So
All of this will make a lot more sense when you actually see in action what it is. Like
right.
the abstract theory here,
Yeah.
you'll see it. You'll
Yeah,
see
yeah.
it. Once you see it, you'll get it better.
So another way of thinking about this is an atomic entity is like a model, which is a term of art.
Right.
All right. It could be sufficient for the entire.
Two.
What's that?
Let's Ember will become more clear as we do it. So
Yeah.
two.
All right. So wait. We had a question. C.S. Bailey asked to go through the features that make Ember compelling versus a static site generation plus minimal JavaScript like for the interactive visualization. Something like Svelte or something like Jekyll would fit here. There isn't a great. So I don't know if this is what Alex meant when he said that we're not using necessarily the best technologies.
Exactly what I meant.
Jeez, you hate Ember so much.
I don't hate it. I'm just saying that this could have been done simply.
Yes, it's very much the case that any of these alternatives would work fine. The things that we generally we try to avoid when building these kinds of projects are relying on a database server and relying on external services, etc. So the model view, I guess, metaphor for the design philosophy of something like Ember typically assumes a database in the back, because so it would be a database of all the enslaved people, much like the spreadsheet that we showed earlier. Like, it's very easy to think of the spreadsheet in terms of a database, like with one table. And I think that's what was I saying? We're going to build this without a database because we don't need a database, because the data set is rather small. So that's a huge plus. And most importantly, what's that?
One table only.
One table and only 206 rows or so. And then additionally, it's static. It's not changing. So literally, we're just going to download the spreadsheet and use that as the data source for the whole project. So in a circumstance like that, static site generators are obviously also perfectly like great solutions. so there, like this is something that we talked about when we were starting this. There isn't a compelling case for using Ember specifically, I don't think, other than that it's something that I've used a reasonable amount. I like the ergonomics of, and I like the opportunity to get better at it. Svelte I haven't used, for
That is the answer.
yeah.
But I don't, and I don't mind the answer. The answer is Moacir wanted to learn more about Ember, and that's why we ended up Ember because it actually doesn't, other than it being a little bit more complex than your average static site generator, um, it doesn't actually add any kind of cons. That is the only con is that it's just a little bit more complex. It's modularized a lot more than your average
Yeah.
static site generator. So with any modularization just means it has smaller components than moving parts. So the more you modularize, the more powerful something becomes, the more scalable it becomes. But it adds complexity. And Ember is a little bit more modular than your average static site generation. Definitely.
Right. So within the Jekyll idiom, um, imagine if all you ever really did in Jekyll was write extremely complicated uh, layouts in the includes folder, because that's what Ember is driven on. It has a basic router that makes different URLs that make the application act in certain ways, but it's driven by components, by these little modules that you can move and reuse, and they can talk to each other and they can inherit information about each other. And that to me is a good way of approaching web developing in 2020, because it scales. um you know Alex and I and many other people learned by just writing long um long HTML documents and then copy pasting. Like, remember back when you had a web page and you wanted to have a consistent header, footer on every page, you had to like copy paste for every page on the site. Obviously, those days are gone, but I think that a more actively component driven version of this kind of development is good. Um, but that's it.
I have to press us on because we only have like 3 or 4 minutes
Oh shoot,
to
yeah.
list
Sorry.
out the other technologies really quick, just because I know them. As
All right.
D3 is what we're going to be using for the visualization itself. Uh, so D3 is a library, a JavaScript library.
It stands for data driven documents.
Yeah, and it is probably the most popular, the most commonly used library for visualizing stuff on the web. Interactive visualizations, because we're not talking about static images. At the end of the day, if this was just a screenshot, we could do this in a million different ways and just take a snapshot and call it a day. But this is something that people will be able to interact with. But you can use all these other tools that are not as popular as D3, but they're also equally valid alternatives.
Yeah, these are Bokeh is sort of the D3 for Python, I think, in the sense that it provides interactivity, that, as far as I know, Matplotlib does not. And I think in R it's Shiny. I know you use Shiny to turn your R notebook into a website. So I think it's Shiny that also provides the kind of interactivity. But this is very much outside of what I know things about.
Right. So 3, Git and GitHub is what we're going to use in order to version our site. Versioning means that we're going to have monitor our site at every stage of development, our project at every stage of development, so that we can,
I think
in
that's
case
right.
something crashes, we can go back in time, fix it. But it's also a system that allows us to manage the code as we both contribute to it. Allows us to write tickets, that pointing out issues, assign them to somebody to fix. It's a sort of solution for working together in teams, building some kind of digital project. involving code. People use it sometimes also to just simply keep track of their dissertations or their Microsoft Word files. I myself have used it for simply keeping track of some writing that I'm doing. So we're going to be using that for sure. I think also important to point out for those who might want to follow along from home, we're going to be using also the terminal a lot. We are both on Macs, and there are
hold on.
Yes.
There are other version control systems.
No, but they
now
need to
I'm
back
now
up,
I'm
back up and
blanking
go
on
home.
what they're now I'm blanking on what they're called, but like that's part of the point. One is like Mercury or something like that. But the point is that I haven't used them. Alex hasn't used them. They're older than they're older
Methuselah.
than Git. SVS, but it doesn't matter. I'm wasting time.
SVNs. Much is the
SVN,
word you're looking for.
And but if there's, we can discuss Ember versus other things, but Git, just use Git. Like, forget it.
Yeah.
All right.
Also for visualization, this bokeh and this shiny gnome, and everybody just does D3. But we're
Well,
definitely
CS
gonna.
Bailey's pointed out that Bokeh runs on D3,
Oh, there you go. I
which
figure
makes sense.
when you said that it allows you to do interactivity on the web, like there's only one way to do that, and that's JavaScript.
Right.
So,
But Bokeh, yeah. So in Python, yeah.
anyways, we're gonna be using a terminal. We're gonna be using a plain text editor. Moacir likes to use Vim. I use Sublime. You can use whatever you want. Knock yourself out. Just make sure it handles Unicode 8. And can you put for terminal? I recommend it for the Windows people. I recommend they get I like the Ruby installer. I know it's not even called a terminal, but it works really well. I know you like other things, but we're not gonna. This is not the kind of setup where we're gonna have time to troubleshoot what you're doing. So this is like one of those things like don't try this at home, kids, or something like without I don't know. Follow at your own risk. That's about it. In terms of languages, just because of the nature of any web project, we are going to be dealing with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at many different levels. That's going to happen. I don't think there's any other language involved here, unless I'm mistaken. Everything is done in either HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, right? I think so.
That's correct.
Yeah, so these are the only 3 languages that we're going to be messing with in this whole affair. And I think that's it in terms of like the tech that we're going to be using, other than, of course, obviously the tech that we're using to talk to each other right now, which is Zoom and Twitch. And OBS. Actually, this is how we get these little, hold on a second. The chirons. We get them because we're using chirons or chirons?
I think it's chirons.
Yes. So we're going to be using OBS in order to do fancy stuff like what Moacir just did.
Yeah.
Like substitute our video with.
Well, I don't know if it's. Yeah. Okay. So it did show up in the stream. Great.
Yeah, it's showing up on the stream. All right, guys. So I think we come up to the top of the hour. This is great. We got to figure out a way now how to share this kind of documentation as we write it. I think we'll figure it out and let everybody know through our Twitch channel.
Yeah.
We'll probably park it on the studio website or something like that. We'll figure it out. Or on the GitHub site that we're going to create for it, on the GitHub repository we're going to create for this. But anyways, thank you for joining us today. It was a lot of fun.
Yes. And next time, Jeremiah will have theme music for us.
Yes, Jeremiah, who is the head of our research data services at Columbia University, where we work at, is a musician, and he promised a soundtrack for our Twitch channel. So we're going to have that next week.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you for watching and participating.
Yes. Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.